Welcome to This is the Domain Name Law Show. We're here every Tuesday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Is your weekly news show, and I say that because, David, if this was a news broadcast, you can't come in even 30 seconds late, even a minute late. You got to come in on time. Pretend we're like news on TV. You don't see the anchor coming in, putting his tie on, his microphone. Did we start? Yeah. So, but I mean, I don't know how you're going to break that habit because it's been over 4 years. And usually, I don't know, David's like 30 seconds into the app. All right. So I'm going to start off by saying hi to my co-host, us, the three amigos. David Michaels, Jeff Neuman. I usually say hi to Jeff first because he's here first, but I'm saying hi to David now. Hey, David, what's going on today?
Oh, I've been chattering with John Berryhill back and forth regarding how many domain names could have been saved if they had proper representation. So he's challenging us to find 80 cases that were wrongly decided or that could have been decided for the respondent if, that's per month, if only they had good representation. I think we have at least two today, maybe three.
Sure. Well, I was going to say, yeah, he's challenging you. Hold on, Jeff. He's challenging you because you're the one that made the comment. Because I almost have to agree with John. The reason I say that, David, is because now if you're looking over the lifetime of UDRPs, sure, we may be able to find in the three digits, possibly four, because there's been thousands, I don't know, 100,000 cases. But per year, there's only 3 to 4,000 cases. So 1,000 of them aren't wrongly decided, I would say. So that's way a big stretch. Jeff, what's your comment? And then I'm going to have to take a look at these the going back and forth between you guys.
Yeah, I have not seen the back and forth, but I think you said 80 per month, David. Yeah, there's not 80 bad cases a month. I think sure you're going to find a bunch of them over the lifetime, and especially early on cases when things were, um, just starting to get developed. There's probably some bad cases then, but yeah, I think it would be tough to find. I don't believe you can find 80 per month, but certainly can find, in the three digits over the 25 years or so.
Yeah, and David, I was going to say, no, I like your challenging of that there are a lot of bad defenses, and I didn't even catch that 80 per month. Yeah, that's pretty tough to find. I would say 80 to 100 in a year, only because there's only say 3 or 4,000 that are filed. But well, so David, when I go through the cases like today, the ones that we're going through, I sometimes have to go through dozens to find a transfer that I really disagree with. Meaning, most of the transfers, like we say, when it's Walmart hyphen login hyphen something, .com, that is one that you can really understand. But with regards to finding that, so David, why do you feel there's just so many? I mean, now knowing there's only 3 to 4,000 a year that are filed per year, surely you don't think a quarter of
Well,
those
I
could.
think it's more per year. I think WIPO alone in 2023 had 6,192. So you add that to maybe a couple thousand by NAF. So yeah, it's gotten definitely more per year. Um,
Okay, so it is 10. I don't know why I was thinking 3 to 4. So it's more close to 9 to 10,000 per year total UDRPs filed.
I
Probably
believe so,
something like
yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll find that number too. But okay, so I see. If you guys want to follow, make sure to follow me, Jeff, and David. It just makes us feel good. I don't know, but anyway, so if you follow David, I'm looking at your comments. I didn't even see back there that it would be interesting to make a list of 80 or so, which you think may have gone wrong. All right, so yeah, so today there's definitely a few. I would say they weren't. Really, there's not only a few. One I wanted to bring up that you guys aren't maybe you may be aware of, but I didn't have on the outline. If you guys want to check out the outline, that's at dnlshow.com/outline. I didn't really get to say hi to Jeff. Hey Jeff, how is everything going with you today?
Everything's great. Just my youngest just graduated high school yesterday, so uh, yeah, I'm. It's time's flown by, and can't believe that this fall, just my wife and I don't know what we're gonna do. Get another dog, probably.
Help, but the youngest. I remember you were looking at colleges, so you selected, and She's going to be moving in there. I mean, in the fall, basically, you go ahead and do
She's
the
going, yeah, the youngest is going to Carnegie Mellon for technical theater.
awesome,
So, yeah.
fantastic school. I mean, cool school too. So not too far from you either, right? Couple hours.
Yeah, about 3.5 hour drive. Yeah, to Pittsburgh. It's closer than you would think from DC.
Yeah,
But yeah.
that's exciting. No, I know you checked out a lot of schools. Well, no, that is so. Yeah, you'll be lonely. So we're going to expect. I can't believe. So I'm lucky enough. I got a partnership with you in TLD Strategies, a joint venture that we have together. So good. There'll be no excuses of I got to take the kids. No, they're out. But they're out. You're home now. We'll be working all the time, and we're going to talk about the next round of GTLDs. But first, I wanted to get to this case that I didn't have on the outline that I thought you guys would find very interesting. So it was manage.co.uk is the domain name. And this was a case where, I don't know if you've read about it, you can go to dnw.com and they have also a link to the actual nominet. What do they call that over there? That's let's see, Nominet Dispute Resolution Service. So that's different because the Nominet Dispute Resolution Service, interestingly enough, has an appeal process. So this domain name, manage.co.uk, was transferred away from the domain owner by panelist Dawn Osborne. Okay, imagine that we got a couple cases today that she's the sole panelist on. And the respondent, the domain owner, was upset and appealed the process. And I didn't even know. We've talked about an appeal mechanism possibly with a UDRP reform, but I didn't know. Jeff, so this Nominet Dispute Resolution Service, is this only for the .uk names? I mean, what do you know about that DRS?
It's only for UK. They do run a couple of the smaller UK owned CCTLDs, but I believe it's mainly for .uk. So there's a couple territories I think they manage, but I believe this dispute policy is just for .uk.
Well, I'll give you guys a chance to look at it. We talk about it next week, but it's exactly what you would want if you're a domain owner and you believe this is just a terrible decision. Manage, I mean, that's pretty generic of a name, right? Manage, and it was the .co.uk. The panelist transferred it away, and then during the appeals process, there was a 3-member appeal panel, and I believe I have it handy here. It looks like that. Who was on that? We know some of the people on there. I believe Nick Gardner. Let me see who was the. Nick Gardner, Ian Lowe, and Claire Milne. Okay, so they each basically ruled. They reversed it. They reversed the panelist decision, which, boy, it's just seems to work. I mean, it worked well in this case for the domain owner, but it really makes sense to have this kind of challenge to a decision, an appeal to the decision. And in this case, they really, ran through Dawn's answer and said, yeah, it's not a great decision. We're going to reverse it. But we'll talk about that next week since you guys haven't had a chance to see it. As I mentioned on the outline, you can go to dnlshow.com/outline and you'll see what we're going to cover today. Right now I'm on B1. That's our domain industry and legal news. But so ICANN announced their first round of these grant program recipients. And the one that stood out, and John Berryhill made a comment on it. I mean, a lot of people are really looking at it. But anyway, it was about this university, this Catholic university in Chile. It looks like Universidad Católica del Norte. So I don't know, North Catholic University. I mean, I'm trilingual. Anyway, they granted this university $500,000 to help domain owners with UDRP assistance. So if you're a domain owner, you get a UDRP. I don't know. I mean, do you have to be in Chile? Do you have to be in South America? Can anybody from anywhere around the world contact this university and say, "Hey, I got a UDRP. Let's use some of your dough to, challenge or fight this decision"? But $500,000 seemed like an awful lot, was what John was saying, and several others were saying. Geez, so this is really unusual. First, Jeff, what's your take on it? And then, David, what do you think?
I wish we knew more about the project than we get from that summary of the people that or groups that were awarded these grants, because it's a fairly sizable grant, but it is an academic institution, so I don't know if they're planning on doing statistical studies or what they're planning on doing with it. I mean, if it literally was just defending UDRPs, it's an insane amount of money, because, well, they're not legal representatives. But someone told me, and I'm trying to remember where that was, that they manage the Chilean dispute resolution service. So for .cl, so it may be for the implementation of their dispute resolution policy and not just for defense of registrants. Maybe that's just the way that ICANN classified it. You'd have to see the whole application, but so I have a feeling there's a lot more that we just don't know, and it may be related to the fact that they manage the .cl dispute service.
Well, I haven't spoken to anybody there, but I found their webpage that talks about it. It's all in Spanish, but my browser translates to English. And it doesn't say exactly what they're going to be doing, but they seem to be focusing on freedom of expression, the right to culture, and the right to digital identity. And these things are going to be addressed. Beyond that, I don't know. But they had a video on this. It's in Spanish. I can't speak or understand Spanish very well, so I don't know. I'll ask my girlfriend to take a look at it and tell me what she thinks.
Interesting enough that you still have your girlfriend to me. Okay, that's interesting. Hey, David.
Ouch! Come on.
Come on. I mean, David's my main guy. He was here before you, Jeff. So he really,
I know.
you know. Anyway, for those who care, yeah, we've been doing it now 4.5 years. We just do it every week, and we'll be here next week too, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. Domain name law. We have some great cases to cover today, but before we get to it, that 500,000 that was awarded to this place, to this college. Yeah, so I think when I saw John Berryhill's comments, I think he was saying that at $5,000 a pop, if you were using, say, $5,000 in funds to help represent or help out some domain owner, you could do that 100 times. Are there this many cases? And I don't know, does it need to be spent in a certain amount of time? But yeah, Jeff, over time, I know, not an assignment, but over time, I'm sure we'll know more about this grant. And it is interesting because it seemed to me like it would be open. It should be open for anyone that could, I guess, appeal to them and say, help me, I need some help with my defense here. I mean, you're the one that got awarded the dough. I would love to been on the end of that, Yeah, I'll take $250,000 and we'll help people when they have problems. Okay, by the way, I was going to ask you guys privately, but I'll ask you right here since you guys didn't respond to me personally. So I gave you this complaint and I gave you this response for this K-Suite, KSUITE.com. Just quickly, you think the response was okay for this complaint that we believe was, bullshit complaint anyway, but what did you think of the complaint and response? First, David, you asked for information about that
Yeah.
email. What do you think?
So the fact that Chad had the domain name since 2003, I think that's the date, that makes a huge difference. The complainant's lawyer made some bald allegations saying, oh, they just recently acquired it after some of the trademark expired or something. So he's making allegations that have no foundation. And he's based in France. So I don't know how you can file a complaint with his bar association. But these French lawyers seem to be playing fast and loose with the facts. So I don't know. I would probably think there's more meat required. So you have a definite defense because there's no bad faith at the time of acquisition. Jeff, what do you think? Could they have gone into more detail? Should they address more issues?
Well, unfortunately, I can't comment because I've requested access twice, Todd, and I couldn't get into it. But based on the complaint alone, it should be a relatively easy case to win. Um, because of how late their trademark was registered as compared to um, when it was acquired. Um, yeah, and I wanted to ask Todd, what did they in the complaint? They said there was on information and belief they believe that the name was transferred again. I think after the in like 2024 after they got their registrations. Was that just a DNS change? Like, did you guys figure that out?
Yeah, it was just a DNS change. But for those listening, so
Yeah.
my business partner got a UDRP for KSUITE.com. He registered the name back in 2004, I think it was. And he got mad when he got this complaint from this French company who just got their trademark a couple years, really in 2024. They said they were using it, I guess, they had an earlier trademark 2022, I think, in Switzerland. Who knows? I think because I don't think it was French. I don't know, but this complaint made some allegations, but basically not much. Is saying we have a mark. It's a recent mark. This name looks like it's changed hands, which it hasn't changed hands. They didn't provide any proof. They basically just said it, and I didn't send. I sent to my colleagues here, to Jeff and David. Here's the complaint. Here's our response to it. Jeff said he hadn't had a chance. I don't know why. I thought I approved that anyway, where you could see the response we had on Google Docs. But yeah, I was just trying to get my friends to look to say, here's what I think strong about your response. And the point is, we feel it's really strong because one, it predates, well predates the trademark registration, and we included in the response that the domain his history, the domain owner, his history of registering, got more than another 100 names with "suite" in them, and quite a few other things. Basically, just felt like it's super strong. I know it's another, it would cost my friend the domain owner $2,000 if he wants to get a 3-member panel, and that's what he normally does. Got a large portfolio of names, so he normally gets a 3-member panel. And this one, I think it's a strong case, but you can't, it seems pretty cut and dry that this, he's requesting reverse domain name hijacking. It was interesting because even he went on LinkedIn, I'm talking about the domain owner, and said, was basically calling out the complainant, saying, you're a company with 200 employees, you got counsel, you should know better than this, trying to take somebody's property, and I feel the same way, and I feel like, yeah, the defense is super strong. No panelist in their right mind, other than maybe Don Osborne. We're going to talk about her as a panelist because she's on panelists on 2 of our cases today. So it was really, me just airing some, not necessarily completely private stuff, but something that we're working on. Looks like he's going to, answer this week. But no, I would say thanks for you guys looking at it. And now I realize Jeff didn't even have a chance to see our response. But I think, it was the standard, something that a lot of the lawyers would respond with, of showing, the history of the defendant, the respondent, with domain investing, definitely the intent when he registered it, of course, didn't know about this company. It wasn't even around, and registered many similar names to that. And there was a few other things I can't even think of because felt like the case was so strong that, yeah, a single member panelist should be fine. But looks, I don't know if he's made the decision yet. He'll make that this week. Because I wanted to ask you sort of an administrative question, Jeff. When you reply, when you send in your response, that's when you select whether you want a 3-member panel, and that's when you select off the list. As I noticed, the WIPO list includes just WIPO panelists, although I've heard in the past, and I know you've been on a panel, although you couldn't on this because you're familiar with the case, that you've been on a WIPO panel. So what is the list? I mean, where is this list they look at that has WIPO panelists plus other panelists to choose from? Do you know?
I'm sure WIPO has links into the other providers' lists, and I think you might have to say in your response list the person's name and then the organization who they're a panelist for. Um, but yeah, WIPO does allow panelists from any um, of the providers. Of course, they're only going to list their own because that's just who WIPO is. Um, and you should put that in your response.
Okay, yeah. I mean, because they when you go to WIPO and you uh, see their form for their standard answer, their template, or their recommendation for a suggested response, the how they want you to set it up, they do give the list of panelists, and it's only WIPO panelists. Okay, and I was going to say it did have an email exchange with Brian Beckham after he had uh, a great webinar with Zach from ICA. If you guys didn't see it, I know you can go to internetcommerce.org and you can find the video. Matter of fact, I have it on our outline. If you go to dnlshow.com/outline, the video, the replay is available for anyone to see of this webinar. Really interesting, really helpful. In 1 hour, packed a lot in there. And Brian Beckham, who is the head of the UDRP, I don't know, area over at WIPO, because they do a lot more than just UDRPs. Really included a lot of information that I think is helpful when they talked mostly about potential reform. But I know in the future we'll have Brian as a special guest here when we get a bunch of great questions ready for him, because I certainly have some, and I certainly thought it was interesting. And Jeff, I'll bring it up quickly. Is a question I had for Brian was any consideration of raising the app or the complaint fee, you know, and I was looking at it from the perspective of, we would like that as domain owners, that these brand owners have to pay $3,000 or $5,000 to file a UDRP. Maybe that would make them think twice instead of filing some of these fraudulent ones if it cost a little bit more than $1,500. And then Brian brought up that they've considered it because they were considering maybe like an expedited type of service, and then complainants may want to pay for that. And I thought, fantastic, gives them a reason to maybe want to pay, because I can certainly think brand owners don't want to pay $3,000 or $5,000 per UDRP, especially when 98% of them are, pretty clear cut cases of cyber squatting, and that really increased their, outlay of expenses for this. But what do you think possibility, or do you think it should happen, an increase in the complaint filing fee?
Well, I mean, I think Brian gave the answer on the call, and I think he's absolutely right. There is constantly pressure on them for lowering the fee because to them, to trademark owners, and remember, 95% of the cases are defaults or pretty obvious. Um, they already feel like they're paying way too much money, right? That you pay 1,500, it's a default, and you know, it's not like you get money back. So I think there's more pressure on them to lower the pricing than there would be from others to increase the pricing. So I don't think it's going to be likely to get an increase.
Geez, it's pretty inexpensive. And you're right, it's certainly the minority that people abuse the system. And it's just a fraction, 1-2%, less than that really abuse the system. That are ruled an RDNH. But what, $1,500 is, I think, just such a small amount to take a shot at a great domain name. And we're going to see some that were transferred today, not necessarily great domain names, but boy, for $1,500, instead of really you're negotiating and somebody's wanting 5 figures
Yeah.
or 6 figures for a name, it's not a bad
I mean, I think
shot
I,
to take.
I think you're right in that the sense, you know, to go after a really good name. But most of the cases, as you and I have looked through the list, they're horrible names that the trademark owner doesn't want. It just has to go after, things like Bank of America slash or Bank of America hyphen login hyphen give me your personal information.com, right? It's there's a ton of those types of domains that, if given the choice, domain owners, trademark owners don't want those names. It's not like but they also don't want it to be deleted and then just go into the pool of available names. So um, if you look at that, yeah, I mean, we're kind of looking at it through a very small lens in the good names that they're going after, simply because there's a few decisions that involve those names. But um, I just don't, when you look at the list of cases, you're not really seeing too many, quote, great names on there.
Yeah, I mean you're right, and I don't know really how to answer that because most of them are crappy names, and why should someone be a company um, obligated to spend $5,000 to get back some obvious, like I said, Walmart hyphen login name, and there's dozens and dozens of them on so many extensions. So I'm not sure the answer of that. Before we move on, David, do you think there should be an increase in the price of filing a complaint?
Only if there's an additional service provided along with it. And what I would recommend is that complaints are vetted for accuracy. Like there should be a fact checker who's going to independently analyze the facts, especially if there is no response. But even when there is a response that's like not represented by a professional UDRP lawyer, because I see that a lot of complaints are filed like they're citing facts that don't exist, or they're just making things up. Just like in
Max,
your
come here.
case week case.
Todd, did we lose you?
No, my dog's going crazy right now, so
Oh, okay.
I just or Jeff, let's talk about the we're
New
going to talk
TLD.
about the new guidebook. So
Yep.
start off with that, and then I'm going to shut this guy up.
Okay. Um, yeah, so this past Friday, as on schedule, I should say, ICANN released the final draft, or I should say the draft final applicant guidebook, which is the full. I think of it as kind of the Bible for new TLD applicants. It has everything in there, all the processes, procedures, all the rules, and how contention sets are handled, how much it's going to cost, all of that. It's about almost 400 pages, and ICANN just posted it for public comment. All of these sections previously had been out for public comment in tranches. There were four of them, and so they've all been out. All the sections have been out for public comment before. It's just this is the first time that you get to see everything all out at once. And so there's a comment period that I believe ends in July. So it's about 60-day comment period, or pretty close to that. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of material, and we're perusing through it now, Todd and I, and others, and some applicants that I know of, just to see if there's anything in there that can't live with, or just seems like a mistake. But it's pretty close to final. I doubt there are going to be many changes, if at all, made to it. And then after this public comment period, then it goes to the ICANN board, who will likely approve the final guidebook for publication in the December timeframe, which is about 4 months, because the policy is that the guidebook has to be finalized and published no later than 4 months prior to an application window opening. And they're still, after 2 years, still saying April 2026 is going to be the launch. So I'm amazed that ICANN's kept to their schedule. And it's a lot of reading. But if you just want kind of a good overview and don't really care about all the details, or want to read the overview and then maybe look at a couple different sections that you might be interested in, at the beginning of module 1, so it's divided into modules, but at the beginning of module 1 is a section called the applicant journey. and that's about 30 pages or so, and that describes a general overview of the entire process from from application to delegation, and it has references to the main body of the applicant guidebook, the rest of the guidebook, if you want to, learn more about whatever that overview section was. So there'll be a very quick overview on auctions of last resort if there's contention set. But if you want to read more about the auctions, you then go into the guidebook, the section that it references, and it'll give you a lot more detail on that. So it's as I said, it's the Bible for new TLD applicants, and it's yet another milestone that ICANN has hit on time to show that this is a real thing and that there will be a process that launches in 2026 that may result in lots more domain extensions in likely 2028, I would say.
Thanks, Jeff. There's several things about the guidebook that's interesting. I'm going to give you some highlights because I know most of the folks aren't going to be looking through this long guidebook, and I'm going through the whole thing. And of course, I know Jeff is, and sometimes actual applicants are doing it. If they're smart, they would do it. Even if you're consulting, even if you're hiring, say, a company like what Jeff and I have together, TLD Strategies. If you are applying, keep in mind you can't be an individual, you can't be a sole proprietorship. It's one of the things that mentions in this guidebook that you need to be an organization, basically an LLC, a corporation. Some it can be a government organization, but
Yeah,
go
you
ahead.
could be a single member LLC, right? Which is the same thing as being, a sole owner or individual. You just have to officially incorporate it, have limited liability. So, but yes, you have to be an organization. You have to have financials and put the financials forward, and you have to really show that you can have the funding to do all the startup stuff and a lot of things you need to do prior to actually getting any revenue that comes in. And so, yeah, I mean, it's all doable. It's a lot of process. It's a lot of writing, a lot of preparation, and it's not for the faint of heart. And it's 277,000 $227,000 minimum. That will be your fee to just apply for a string. Um, so yeah, I mean it's go on, Todd. If there's more things
No,
you found
there's
interesting.
Jeff. I mean, what you're saying, you know, I'm shouting out what we're doing because we're right now helping some folks, and there's some people in the crowd who've referred some potential clients to us, and believe it, you refer someone to us, you'll be rewarded, and that'll be, depending on if they become a actual client or not. Except we're helping with, like Jeff said, if you need, you might already have a corporation, but you're going to be forming something new for for this application for this new registry. If you're successful, we help you with that. Of course, we're going to help with budgeting, but just really helping with every aspect of it. And the fantastic thing, working with Jeff and I is Jeff's an attorney. I'm a registered investment advisor. So we have clients that are like, hey, I'm putting together some agreements because I'm raising some money. So there's things that I'm knowledgeable about, and I'm registered, that I can certainly help with certain things with regards to how you're setting up, if you're taking on investors to help you with this. But most importantly, whether it's something simple like Jeff said, you're an individual, you want to apply, you can still apply, help you form the proper organization. But there's just so many small details to this, and you're not going to go it alone, and you're going to need some legal help, you're going to need some financial help, and the big competitors to what we're doing. It's beautiful. We love it. There's no way. I mean, we could always undercut them, I guess. And I don't like to, but with regards to price, because you're going to need, some, like I said, legal help and financial help, and the others that that are competing with us. Some of them don't even really offer that unless it's for a lot of additional funds. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, the number one or the first recommendation we always make is to file a new LLC to apply, especially for existing companies, because you don't want to do a filing, create a corporation that kind of gives away your string that you want to apply for, or the fact that you're even applying for a string, because all that's sensitive information. Every brand that we represent certainly does that. We'll file an LLC for them that masks their name, and so that one of their competitors doesn't see it. There's lots of little tricks and things that you want to do during the application process that may not be so evident on from the outside, and it's all about avoiding contention sets to the extent possible. It's all about avoiding objections, by saying the right things, by knowing and preparing in advance how you'll respond to certain questions or comments. There's a lot that goes into it, and it's not just, a quick application. It really does take time and thought. But most important, the advice that we like to give first and foremost is, should you really be applying? And I know that's hard because sometimes we may talk our clients out of applying, but that's the best thing for them, or likely the best thing for them, if that's their decision. It's not for the faint of heart. And it's a hard business. And if you want to be a generic, not a brand or anything like that, you just want to launch a new generic top level domain. Well, you need to think about not just the resources to run it, but you have registrars out there that you're competing for their attention. And even so, those registrars don't have the marketing capabilities to um, evangelize your TLD to get any kind of customer traction. And so you're going to have resources and show that you have a marketing plan that doesn't rely on the registrars. Because if you're going to just apply and do the field of dreams, which is, I'm always saying this, you can't just put something out there. If you build it, they'll come. And that's the famous line from the Field of Dreams movie. That's not the case with domains, not anymore. It may have been the case for ComNet.org, perhaps Info and Biz, but not anymore. So, yeah, those days are over.
We're of course this next year, and like Jeff said, everything seems to be on track of this application window opening next May, 2026. When I say, I'm thrilled to be on a team with Jeff to help people, because it's getting really exciting now to watch some real smart folks that I know what they're interested in, what strings they're interested in applying for. And not only that, but some that are real smart with knowing that's only the beginning. When Jeff mentioned the marketing, what is your plan with this? If it's truly a generic extension, what is your plan? And some of them have pretty sophisticated plans, and you must, but there's all sorts of promise. And I'll say one thing. So I had a lunch the other day with Braden, and I was telling him, so it's interesting. I know, over the years he's mentioned it on Sherpa, but he's spent $12.5 million investing in domain names in the last 3 years. So I was saying, do you have interest? Basically, a one word answer: yes. He has interest in owning an extension. You know, I'd and I because he knows it can be very prosperous if it's done right, but it's just so hard to do right. And we've seen that with the last round. I'm gonna go right to Anthony and see what Anthony has comments or questions on, and then I'll make a few more comments about this guidebook, because there are some interesting facts or points that you need to consider. What's up, Anthony? Nice to have you. I do it real smooth, like he's here, like we've practiced it, and then nothing. Anthony, are you there? He's in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
what's up?
Got some microphone issues. You've seen this question before, so I'll make it quick. How likely are we to see a canvas-related string? What could that string be? And most importantly, what factors for success need to be lined up to make a string like that successful?
What I didn't catch it. A canvas related?
Cannabis or
Related
Kansas?
UG string, and what might that string be? And then thirdly, what are the factors of success that need to be satisfied in order for that to be commercially successful?
Jeff, Anthony, I didn't catch you. Did you say cannabis?
Yes, cannabis.
Yeah,
Okay, okay,
Yes.
yeah.
fantastic.
I
Go ahead.
I would say that I think there's 100% likelihood that there'll be one or more, likely more applications for certain strings. And I think, you know, without mentioning any, because I don't want to, get in people's way or tell them about, some I do know about. But all I can say is, yeah, that it's 100% likelihood that people will apply for it. There's also a likelihood that governments may object to it, right? Because it's not legal in every country. So if you're going to apply, you're gonna have to um, likely make certain commitments that you're only going to allow sales in states or countries that where it's legal to do so, and you're going to have to, show and provide how um, you're going to regulate that space or self-regulate that space, uh, and how it's successful. I'll give the kind of standard answer. You have to get organizations, trade associations, things like that to buy in and to especially buy into your application because you're going to be relying on them uh, to get the word out there. And there are certain products and services that Todd, you and I may talk about at some point down the future, um, to help with getting associations on or in a role of being able to assist. But I think that is going to be key to success of any string, whether it's cannabis or um, crypto or anything like that. You're going to need to have some ins with organizations that have lots of members or lots of customer reach in order to get the word out there about your string, and then hopefully get some high profile users of your string and to try to generate some buzz and interest and things like that. So there is one TLD out there, .buzz, that kind of likes to say it caters to the cannabis, but it didn't say that at the beginning. At the beginning, it was more an application of like news stories. What's the buzz out there? But they kind of rebranded it to try to get. And frankly, I think they've gotten a bunch of cannabis related businesses or individuals getting those names. So yeah, I think it's all going to come down to buy-in from associations, organizations, or companies that have big distribution and outreach, and also to providing a business model where you can self-regulate and overcome any government objections.
Anthony, Jeff gave you a ton of hints there about, and I'll be more, real specific. One, Jeff mentioned there need to be very clear in your application, and this is for, and there's certainly going to be applications for strings that are unconfusingly related to the cannabis space. Okay, say canna, but especially I love the three letters, but whether, and I'll mention a few, and but from CBD to THC to pot, but to short things because that historically were the more, I'd say, applied for and successful strings, but it's going to be for that space not only very clear in the application, some of those organizations that Jeff is saying later on you'd want to be connected with, important to be connected with them early on so they can be possibly part of an application. But anyway, Jeff, I mean, included in when you're trying to be clear on how you're going to stay within the guidelines, what is, where are you going to do business and so on, because there's so many jurisdictions, so many places that absolutely won't allow it. So this, if you're applying for something and it's clearly going to be in that space, in the cannabis space, then your application, in my opinion, needs to be even more clear. You need not necessarily more professional, but you're going to have to really include a lot of content there uh, to receive an approval. Because if some people, some applicants in that area, if they're not specific on their plans with that extension, I don't expect some of them to be approved. But then, I always defer to Jeff, but Jeff already gave tons of great information on this, or hints about what is going to be needed to not only be successful with an application, but then to be successful after you get an application. And we'll say that, of course, the marketing, that's going to be the funnest part when people are successful. And we're going to talk about, well, briefly, this applicant or the assistant support program for if you have, you're an organization and you don't have a lot of money, you need some support. There is a program, and it actually give you 75 to 85% discount off of that $227,000 fee that Jeff talked about. Well, pretty substantial. So it could bring your, fee down to 35 grand to 45 grand. That is something that certainly if someone qualifies for, and that is something that when, like I said, all you do is go to tldstrategies.com. You can book a consultation with us, a meeting, and talk with you about that, because I think it's a great program. I don't know how, it seems like there's quite a few people trying to take advantage of it, but it's just now really underway. But there can be some big discounts. A couple things I wanted to mention before we move on is I thought it interesting, Jeff, the ascending clock second price auction. So there's going to be, in this round, they're going to try to prevent, certainly going to prevent private auctions. And I don't know how they go about preventing joint ventures. Is that just, because if I'm applying and then a competitor's applying for a string and we both find out about it, say we find out about it in this, right now, I contact them and say, let's go ahead and get together and
Well, you can do a joint venture now before the application window opens, but once you file your application, you can't, there are rules that prevent you from materially modifying your application other than for normal business reasons, right? The application process could take a couple of years. So during that time, it's natural to have officers of the company leave, new officers come in, board of directors come in or leave, things like that. That's all normal. But making major changes, restructuring the way, let's say, revenue is distributed, or restructure the ownership, that's the kind of thing that will pull up the red flag. And if it looks like a joint venture between two applicants, then that's not going to be allowed.
Yeah, I noticed we got tons of cases. We got our cases we got to get to. But Anthony, go ahead, and I'll make a couple comments about the
One of
guidebook.
the beautiful things about the last round was seeing consumers, users, adopt the identity of the TLD that they had selected, one of the new Gs that they had selected for registering their business name. We see this in .ai, .attorney, and .lawyer. I think a real challenge with any of the new strings, including the Canna one, is choosing a string that consumers can identify with. And I don't know how to do that in the Canna. That they wouldn't be afraid to be seen associated with their name. That's all I've got. Thanks for the answers.
It's a very valid comment, and I think that's another. The selection of a string is incredibly important. But the more obvious or generic the string is, the more obvious others will think it is, and you're likely to face a contention set going to an auction. It's all valid discussion points.
The other couple points I wanted to make real fast, because I thought would be interesting, because the layperson is, you'll hear conversations about what happens if this. Well, I'll tell you now, they've released this guidebook, and they're pretty specific. So when there is a contention set, well, I'll tell you one thing. If I apply for .crypto and Jeff applies for .crypto, obviously it's hypothetical, and we were the only two, and we had applied, I want .crypto, but if I don't get .crypto, I want .todd. And Jeff says, if I don't get .crypto, I want .jeff. Well, when they announce the applications, after the window's closed, and here's what strings have been applied for, and Jeff and I both know, geez, so they say .crypto's contested. So then I go, you know what? I'm going to go to my alternate string. Go ahead and just, sign me up for .todd. I don't want to compete for .crypto. And if Jeff does the same thing and says, I don't want to, compete for .crypto, sign me up for .jeff, switch me to my alternative option. Well, then .crypto is going to be available. Basically, no one can get that. Then if the window's closed, they could get it maybe on a next round. But I thought it was interesting because there is going to be sometimes when someone doesn't want to, maybe they have some financial constraints, doesn't want to, or they like their alternate option just maybe nearly as much as their first option. So it is interesting if as soon as you know that the string that you're applying for is in contention and you decide to go with your alternate string, if everybody else did that too, then that one's just out there floating. You're not going to know, and that's, ICANN doesn't want people to bluff and bullshit. But I thought it was, interesting because I'm thinking, damn, you really got to, play it smart and know. I mean, I don't know how, how you're going to, I guess each individual's decision, but because if you and somebody else does decide to stay with your number one option and it's contended, then you're going to go to this ascending clock second price auction. And so I already told you one thing, that's how that works. If there's, your string is in contention and you have an alternate option, if everybody selects their alternate option, that primary string is, back available. Okay, if it ends up being two people are in contention for a string, then what they'll do, ICANN's not going to have, allow private auctions. They're going to have what they call is, okay, so the auction starts at, and this is just hypotheticals, auction starts at 50,000 and there's three of us. Okay, we all are willing to bid 50,000. Then it goes to 100,000. Then we all say we'll do 100,000. Goes to 150. One person drops out because there's two of us left. It goes to 200. Now another person drops out, so there's only one of us that would bid 200,000. That person wins, but they only have to pay what that second highest bidder, the 150 that they were willing to pay. So just so you know, that's how they have the auctions set up as of right now. And it's interesting, it's pretty straightforward, so it's just having to be called ascending clock second price auction. But, no more private stuff, pretty straightforward. Do I have that right, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean it's the same way they did the auctions, the ICANN auctions the last time. Only now there's going to be a lot more of them because of the no private resolution. And I think, I think there are going to be people that are going to try to game the system and do things behind the scenes. And so I think the real proof is going to be when ICANN is faced with, okay, we think these guys tried to go around the rules and, actually enforces it. Because that's really going to be the only effective way to, once you take action against one, then I think you'll kind of set a precedence and others won't follow suit. But if you're not going to enforce, then everyone's going to try to get around the rules.
Well, very nice to have attorney Karen Bernstein with us today. I mean, before I get to you, Karen, I want to say to let people know, Karen is not only a panelist, and she's going to be on our mock hearing at NamesCon with Jeff and I. I'm actually just the court jester there. We got real lawyers like Karen, real panelists like Karen, who she's going to be playing a panelist, and we got a special outfit for her. But anyway, it's nice to have Karen is experienced as a complainant attorney, representing the complainant side, representing the respondent, and as also as a panelist. So it's a pleasure having you here, Karen. How's everything going today?
Thanks, Todd. We're warming up here in New York. It's pushing 80 and probably going to be close to 90 by Thursday. So it feels like summer finally. It's been very cool here in New York, which I don't mind. I just wanted to comment about the cannabis thing. So I have been actively involved with having clients in the cannabis industry since 2014. And, it was a great industry for a long time, but in recent years, there's been no money in it. And we're seeing California suffering, for example, with illegal cannabis businesses and all of I'll say the red tape that's involved with running cannabis businesses, and people expected to get rich quick. Here in New York, it's been an absolute mess. And even in Massachusetts, which was a good program, has also been kind of in tatters with either regulators that have conflicts of interests, or there's some sort of political reason why things aren't going well. Right here in New York right now, there's a bunch of people who work for the regulator of cannabis here in New York wrote a letter basically saying they want a particular person to be removed. It's that contentious. But getting back to the dispensaries and the growers and the distributors, they have no money. Out in California, they're dying because those distributors and those growers are selling cannabis on the black market out the back door because they're not making enough money. And what's happening here in New York is that a lot of that weed is coming to New York and then being repackaged under licensed distributors, licensed plant brands, and New York State is trying to crack down on that. So what am I getting at here? It sure seemed like a great idea a couple of years ago for a .canna, or a cannabis or whatever it is. But whoever is going to apply, and I'm sure there will be, they're not going to be really in the cannabis industry. I think they're going to be speculators. I mean, unless you get Snoop Dogg or someone of that stature, not to mention, and I agree with Jeff, the hurdles with the GAC, that's the Governmental Advisory Committee, I think it is, the C, and that is involved with ICANN policy and objecting to applications for lack of just trying to simplify this. And they have a say in the matter, scandalous, it's cannabis, right? So I wanted to mention that, and I wholeheartedly agree with Jeff about people trying to market TLDs. I know that Jeff has been involved with .hip hop, and I have in the past worked with .me, and they're a great success story because they've done such an outstanding job for the last 15 years, 17 years with their marketing. There was no real popularity in .ai, I think, at the time that .me launched, and they did a great job. So, you got to have a war chest if you're going to have a GTLD, and you better know what you're doing, and you better have the right people. And I totally also agree with the crypto. The crypto situation, I think, is also kind of a Wild West, unregulated industry. And that is going to be get the popcorn out. Frankly, I think it's going to be an interesting play. So that was it. That's all I had to say. Thanks for listening.
Oh, well, thanks, Karen. Thanks for being here. And, you're here and we're talking about these cases, if you want to say anything, but it's fantastic having you here. And you hit the nail on the head with regards to what's really going on in the cannabis business. Okay, that's really what's happening. A lot of the companies are struggling. The black market is not struggling at all. Basically, it's tidal waves of business in the black market, and right, everything here is going to New York. So I don't, and in the past, companies didn't want to be connected so specifically with having a cannabis name. We know that as domain investors, people standing akimbo is the name of a dispensary, not fucking buy your weed here. So to have an extension, and I just think that ship has sailed a little bit. The cannabis business needs to get its shit straight, nationally here in our country. So I don't think I think there's just so much more promise in other areas, other businesses. So that's just like too big of a challenge. But I don't want to say too much because some people reach out to Jeff and I, and certainly want to look into that. Hey, I wanted to say we have another special guest joined us today, Dr. John Berryhill. He's going to be doing a couple panels with me at NamesCon. One of them is how to stay out of trouble and what to do if you're in it, if you step in it. And then, of course, he's going to be with us. He's going to be representing the domain owner in our mock UDRP hearing, and he doesn't even know the facts yet. So I'm going to make it tough on him. But Dr. John,
Don't tell any of us yet. Don't tell any of us yet. It's too soon.
Oh no, I'm not. I'm not going to tell you the case facts. And Jeff and Karen, our panelists, John is going to be representing the respondent. Jason Schaefer is representing the complainant. And then we have this floating. I'm just crossing my fingers that for some reason Zach shows up to be the third panelist. But anyway, we're going to have a fun mock hearing, wigs and all. But John, how's everything going today? What's up?
I'm pretty good. I never let the facts get in the way of a good argument anyway, so that's not a problem. I did wonder about something that Jeff said about the new GTLD program that was kind of intriguing, and Todd, you mentioned like if you were applying for .crypto, and then maybe your second choice is Todd and his second choice is Jeff, but it really doesn't work out that way. It works out more like 15 people applying for .crypto, and their second choice is .wallet. All right, it's because the that was kind of
Yeah.
a silly thing. But Jeff had mentioned about the prohibition on private contention resolution, and I wanted to, and he said people will come up with ways to game that, and I was just curious if Jeff, you had heard of any ways to game that.
Well, I have some ideas, uh, but I've actually, I'd rather not make it public and say it because I don't want people to actually do it. But I've already come up with a couple ways, and they ignored me and didn't address it. So we'll we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm sorry to be so vague, but if you were in the implementation review team discussions, I did mention a couple things, ways that they could legally do things that would result in a change of an organization. In other words, giving a TLD to an organization that never applied.
Okay. Well, have you heard this one? Where instead of resolving the contentions privately after the fact, we round up a bunch of usual suspects. For example, I can tell you, 10 different organizations that are going to be applying for new TLDs, and I can probably tell you the TLDs they're going to be applying for. One way that seems to skirt the rules is to form a consortium prior to the application process, in which there is a sort of a private contention resolution over who gets to apply for which strings. For example, we get 20 people in the room. They put all their strings into a list. I look at these lists and I say, okay, here are the contention sets. We're going to have an auction, and only the winner of the auction is going to apply for that TLD, and we're going to use the proceeds to win the ICANN contention set.
Sure, you could do that at the beginning, and you can describe your consortium as being the owner of the application. Yeah, you can do anything you want before the application window opens. Um, to give you the best odds. Absolutely, you can do that. That's not even going around the rules. That's explicitly allowed.
Well, it's not going around the ICANN rules, but it might be a real good idea. And Jeff, or anyone else who's listening, and I'm just going to put it to you this way, Jeff: if you hear of something like that, which you may likely hear of something like that. You may want to get the services of an antitrust lawyer to look
Yes,
into what's called bid rigging.
right. That's correct.
Bedwetting?
But
Oh, that was bid rigging. I thought you said
yes,
bedwetting. Hey, John, so do you think that's why a lot of these folks have been announcing publicly, I'm going after this extension because they want to connect with others that are applying for the same extension to do some, I don't know,
no, I just think some of them are stupid, or
creative
some of them
thing?
want to get their, some of them just want to get their name out there to potentially scare others away from applying, or they're just not familiar with the process and they're just, or sorry, I should say, or they want to land other clients, right? So they want to beat their chest and say, I'm supporting, I'm going to support 100 or 200 applications. We've already got these 50, and so come on and join our, pool. But I don't think people are at this point forming consortiums to apply yet. That will happen, I'm sure, but it hasn't. I don't think it's happened yet. I think the people, but John can say if he disagrees. I think people now are just stupid or trying to get more customers.
Todd, I think you just had a brilliant idea for an experiment, which would be to get someone to make an announcement of that kind, and then see what the cat drags in.
Yeah. Well, they're doing it. And I wanted to tell you that's not the first time I've been called brilliant. Hey, we're going to get to some of these cases. And John, I know there was some, David was mentioning, yeah, there's so many wrongful UDRP decisions, thousands, and you're saying there's no way you're going to find 80. And, each week I look through these cases and I try to find egregious transfers that just, I can't believe this was transferred. And there usually only a couple that I think that, are really bothersome decisions, problematic. But so we're going to get to some today. Um, and then you guys, I mean, I sure hope if you and Karen have any comments, chime in, or even if you just bail out of the airplane, I understand that. Okay, so the first case we're going to cover today is volshop.com, volshop.com. So this was a recent decision. University of Tennessee files this complaint against Christian Calvin. The complainant, University of Tennessee, owns the Vols mark, VOLS, and they've owned it for over 100 years. They're basically in the university, and they're called the Volunteers, but they have Vols, and I guess is it TN Vols? It's Vols Shop, I believe, is their
Yeah, it's the Tennessee Volunteers
right,
is
but
the
it's Vols
university.
Shop. I think with the S is their website. I have it somewhere on here, but okay. So in this case, the respondent um, included with his response, hey, listen, I'm going to transfer the name to him. Just have him agree to a few things. I want my name retracted from this complaint because I don't like my name in the press in a negative way like this. So let's go ahead and take care of this. And then the complainant said, no, we're not going to give in. This guy wants to say it's a donation to us, probably wants a big write off. We don't get all the information here. But so the complainant says, no, we want to go through with this UDRP. And the panelist says, yeah, matter of fact, I'm not going to retract your name. Um, and Jeff and I guess Karen's a panelist as well. Jeff, when it comes to retracting someone's name, on what conditions, I mean, will you consider retracting a respondent's name from, an action, a complaint?
Well, I mean, there are a couple circumstances. One is usually the respondent will ask, right? So that's not usually a thing that might come up sua sponte. Although there are cases where we've found, like fraudulent impersonations of where the complainant will ask for the respondent's name to be redacted because the respondent used to his information of an employee of the complainant, right? So that's kind of a weird one that happens from time to time. But first of all, I would only consider it if the respondent wins the case, right? I don't think I would decide to redact a respondent's name absent some extraordinary circumstances if the respondent doesn't end up winning the case. But then, if the respondent does win and they ask for information to be redacted, um, you know, I would consider that in a number of cases. Um, but again, the respondent has to win, at least in my view, from what I've seen.
I agree, Jeff. I had a case where I was representing the complainant. The exact same scenario. The respondent was fake who is showed the name of my client's employee's name, and one of the addresses at one of their offices. And so I requested on behalf of the client to have the respondent's name redacted, and they did. But look, it would have to be a really mitigating circumstance. That would be a very special circumstance, such as some sort of imposter phishing sort of situation. I was trying to think of any other scenario because, technically you have to be over the age of 18 to register a domain name. So if it was a minor, I don't think you would see that kind of situation, to protect a child's name. But who knows? Maybe there's revenge porn or some kind of oddball weird situation that would be perhaps a way to redact even the complainant's name if they brought a domain name dispute. I'm making this up as I go along.
That's what I do. Hey, let me give a few more facts to this case, and I want to ask David and John if he'll chime in about a possible successful defense here, because the respondent did respond. They had bought the name on November 2017, so 8 years ago, at GoDaddy expired auction for $840. He said, what I planned on doing with it was having sort of a talk website, talk shop about the volunteers. The panelists didn't believe him, and the panelists said, you didn't make any preparation to do any of this stuff that you say you were, planning on doing. So James Bridgman, who was the single member panelist here, ruled, 1, 2, 3, that the complainant was successful. One, showing that they had a mark that was confusing, had a legitimate mark and it was confusingly similar. Two, that the respondent had no legitimate interest, even though the respondent was saying, I bought it for this particular reason and I paid, $850 for it, 8 years ago. And the panelists felt that, that was in bad faith. You did it because there's a $25,000 for sale lander on this page, and you have that number probably because the panelists thought because you're targeting this, complainant. So first, David, is there the respondent did reply, didn't do a good enough job in, I guess replying, but was there a defense this respondent had to maybe hold on to his name?
Yeah, I think that, he gave up too early and decided he wanted to give it up, but he was just sticking on the issue of how he wanted to give it up. And that's, I think, his mistake. If he had been represented, he should have taken a different tactic. Vol is a European term for ox. In Romania, it actually means flight, so flight shop, ox shop. And there was a business called in Czech Republic called Vol Shop. Before, that was up until 2019. So while he owned a domain name, that business was active, and there are over 2,000 active businesses according to Open Corporates that incorporate the word vol. So, and it's vol shop is registered in .ru, .hu, .lat. In Hungarian, it means to be, I think, according to Google Translate. But it's a common business term there. And there's a common dictionary word. You could have cited the Hallmark licensing case saying, hey, the respondent has rights and legitimate interest in a domain name because it corresponds to a well-known descriptive dictionary word. It was just a GoDaddy for sale page. And I don't know how they said they had the 3 ads there. And those, even if GoDaddy was sometimes spiking the page with ads unbeknownstly to him, that shouldn't count against him because that was GoDaddy stuff. And they didn't say that those ads targeted the complainant. Now, yeah, if you do Google Vol Shop, you will get mostly, like in North America, you'll mostly get the University of Tennessee, but I never heard of it before. I've been to Tennessee, and I didn't hear about it when I was there in the 90s. But if you type in vol space shop, you'll find vol.shop, which is a Romanian website selling clothing. Looks like well-dressed women who like to look sleek.
Well, send
So
photos if you have any of that. I'd like to see. Just kidding. Okay, so you never heard of University of Tennessee? So that already says a lot. John, I know you would have slowed things down here and not probably told the guy, yeah, don't try to give in already. But what are just a couple things this person, from the facts I've given you, might have been able to do since they did reply to, you know, hold on to the name? What could have helped them?
Okay, well, look, whatever vol might mean in some other language, okay, you've got the complainant who is very well known as the vols in Tennessee. The respondent is in Tennessee, and he bought the domain name, for reasons specifically relating to Tennessee. So whether the domain name in the hands of someone else doing something else somewhere else, might be fine. That's a different reality. These cases have to be decided in the reality where we live in. So the guy, said he bought it 8 years ago. He wanted to use it as a talk shop website, about the university and sports. That's what it says here. So, number one, it is very easy for people to come up with, with sort of and people do. I mean, people register domain names with an idea in mind and never get around to it. And I totally get that. But at the end of the day, what matters under the UDRP is demonstrable preparations to use it. And so you spent that money 8 years ago, and I you never got around to it. I totally get that, but you did register it for a purpose relating to the mark, and specifically, all right, and the respondent admits that, and so you don't get to go back and talk about what it might mean in Romania, okay, because this guy's not in Romania, he's in Tennessee. You have to deal with the reality, that you have in front of you. And so it's kind of an interesting one for me, because I once defended a domain name, Mercedes Shop, and it was a hugely popular forum where people did, talk shop about Mercedes and whatnot. And it was kind of interesting because there was a first UDRP that was filed against it, and the domain name was owned by three guys, who ran this forum for people to talk about Mercedes, and I won the case. All right. Oddly enough, the three guys then formed an LLC. They transferred the domain. This was, back in the like 2004, 2005, when a lot of things hadn't been figured out yet. They transferred the domain name to the newly formed LLC. Mercedes came back with a second UDRP, against it, and they said, "Oh, it was a new registrant," even though it's the same guys forming the LLC, and it was either the LLC dissolved and went to one of the guys, or whatever. But in any event, it was the same guys running it. It was the same website, and that case actually got settled. But the complainant's attorney and I were so curious to know, how we did that. We part of our settlement was to allow the UDRP to go to a decision anyway. But yeah, I mean, you can certainly have a fan site. It's kind of weird, to have it with shop on it, because you don't really talk shop about sports. It'd be like Vol Sports Talk or something. But and if he had made some demonstrable preparations, some kind of movement in that direction, that would be, then you're talking about a fan site defense, a nominative use defense. But when you have somebody who lives next door to the complainant, who is very well known in Tennessee, and they say that they registered it as a specific reference to the complainant's mark, then no, you don't get to run off and say, "Oh, well, there's a bazillion other things with vol in it," because that's no longer relevant to what the respondent's state of mind and intent was when he registered the domain name.
You're right. I mean, flat out being dishonest. But you did say what I got from it, John. certainly defenses here. And if this person would have just taken some action, made some preparation, if he had a goofy little show like this and he did it every week and he talked about the volunteers, that school, he could at least submit that and say, look, and we don't make any money off our podcast. But certainly there's also a slight way that the person probably could have done some fair use of actually a commercial site saying, but that's a little iffy. But anyway, so there are some defenses if you stay with reality and you're clear on you know I mean, like I said, anyway, there are some defenses. A related case I wanted to get to real fast, so we can get to all of our cases today, was GoBlue.com. So this was a website. So that last one, yeah, Vols, that was a transfer. Okay, so like we mentioned, that was a transfer. GoBlue.com is one that really bothered me from a few years ago because this was University of Michigan going after this Jason guy who really worked for Mark Cuban. Now, Mark and I both went to Indiana University. I got better grades than him. He so far has done better than me. Anyway, I say that when I'm talking about the money. Okay, so the complainant in the Go Blue case is Michigan, University of Michigan. They have a trademark in M Go Blue. That's how goofy they are. M Go Blue was their big trademark. Now they said they had common law rights in Go Blue because they had been using it for 60 plus years, and we all know. Okay, so like I said, I went to a Big Ten school. Yes, I'm very familiar with that Go Blue bullshit. So
I like go blue and white for Penn State.
yeah, well, okay, well Jeff. So I'm going to go to you first here, and that's so the complainant claimed that the domain name was purchased in 2022 by this Cuban employee, Mark Cuban's employee, to really to disrupt, their business, disrupt because he pointed it to some Indiana store, an IU store where you can buy IU apparel instead of Michigan apparel. Well, Cuban had bought it on 10/8/2022, which really doesn't matter because the domain was registered in 96, but still it was after Michigan's mark. They've been using it for a long time. But anyway, Cuban buys this in October 2022. On that day, he goes on Twitter and he says, hey, you guys, today's the big game against IU. Look what we got. And now if you go to Go Blue, you're going to see. And he said it was a parody, which really doesn't make sense. But he said it was like joking around. And it was his free speech to do. And as they did answer in this case, and they said, they asked for RDNH because they said, Go Blue. Okay, the panelists in this case was Natalie Dreyfus, Nick Smith, and Clive Davis. No, I'm just kidding, Clive Elliott. And they had ruled a transfer in this case because they said that it actually did disrupt the business. Not everybody knew it was a joke. There was no labeling of it as a joke. People around the world that are sports fans, somebody could go to Go Blue, see all this red and white stuff. It's cream and crimson. And it can be confusing. But basically, the panelists said that wasn't a joke and it wasn't a parody. And of course, we're not going to rule RDNH. We're not even going to rule for you. You say it's friendly trolling, not meant to disrupt, but you did exactly that. And you, it sort of admitted it in your tweet. So, Jeff, this was a ruling. GoBlue.com was transferred because of the actions that the respondent had taken after buying the name and what they did with it, forwarding it. Was there a way? Is there a free speech defense? Even though the UDRP panelists, they're not, they don't have to abide by American laws, free speech, our Constitution. But was there a way to, be successful in defending GoBlue.com? I'm surprised they just walked away from such a great domain name.
Well, this case I go back and forth on for different reasons. Was it winnable? Sure. After they bought it, they could have pointed it like they did, and then a couple days later or a day later, then after the joke's out, then stop the redirect and you know use it for something else that is non-infringing or parody or whatever. But just pointing it to the team's um, shop, Indiana's shop, and you can go there and buy things for Indiana University from them instead of buying things from Michigan. That is kind of the definition of disruption of a competitor. Yes, Mark Cuban's not the competitor, but where it's redirecting to is a competitor. The reason I sometimes go back and forth is that um, I don't I don't like it when UDRP panelists try to interpret concepts like parity and others. This could have been a case where I think the panelists could have said, if defended a little bit better, could have said, you know what, this is potentially infringement, and it should be a court that hears this. This is not the typical cyber squatting that the policy was designed to prevent. And so I think the panelists, the best possible outcome in this case for the respondent would have been this is just beyond the scope, go to court, figure it out. And I think that the respondent, in theory, could have done that instead of going along with the transfer. I don't think they did. I would have, known that. But, the problem is exactly kind of what John was saying for the last case, right? The intentions were, may have been pretty clear on that day, but they're using it to point to a commercial site of a competitor. They didn't change it after the quote joke was up. They didn't give any other hints that it was truly a joke. And how do we know that, this isn't just an after the fact argument that, oh, we're just going to say it's parody. We're not going to provide proof that it was parody. It's not like it's got a bunch of humor on there. It's just pointing to an actual site, not like a landing page that kind of is jokey or, it points to the commercial site. And the panelists are right. No, um, anyone unfamiliar with the joke uh, would not get it by going straight to goblue.com. So, yeah, I think there are things that the respondent certainly could have done to make its case better if it thought ahead. I don't think they thought ahead. I don't think they cared. Right? For Mark Cuban spending the money to buy this, probably these couple news articles that came out of it was all the attention that paid for itself for him. And yeah, but the thing I go back and forth with is whether this should have been kicked out to a court or decided here. But other than that, ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the right decision.
Yeah, David,
Well,
what do you think about this case? Any comments?
I would have focused on the first element, because their trademark is for M Gold Blue, and Gold Blue is descriptive. M Gold Blue makes it distinctive, and they never bothered to apply for Go Blue, probably because their counsel told them you're not going to get it. But other businesses have gotten trademarks for Go Blue with regards to a variety of things. So, and I've seen that in 2019, goblue.org sold that drop catch for $650. So I'm assuming it was a domain investor who probably resold it, or maybe still trying to sell it. But as far as the free speech argument, I don't think it was written well. I don't think that they emphasized how much it was covered in the media, because I remember seeing those tweets from Mark Cuban. And I don't think that anybody, and I don't know who wrote this, but in the opinion, it says people outside the United States would go to Go Blue expecting to go to Michigan University's website to buy some merchandise from their store. I'm sorry, but that's not true. Outside the United States, nobody cares about Go Blue. We don't know if it's one school or another or something totally different. It's not
Yeah,
distinctive.
there's a pretty funny typo in this case that I didn't see the first time, but it's so obvious, right? In the first finding, tell me what's wrong with this. Complainant represents the interests of Michigan State University, founded in 1817. The distinctive colors are used by the complainant are maize and blue. What's wrong with those two
Michigan
sentences?
State is green.
Exactly. So I just think it's funny that the panel found that the complainant represents the interests of Michigan State University.
Yeah, well, John, does David make a good point there that go blue? Because we're not privy to the complaint here. This is an old case, and we're going to move on to these two transfers that may make this 80 list that we're trying to come up with for you, John. The list of 80 bad decisions. Okay, but the go blue, they really didn't talk. They said they had a common right, a common law mark to this, but I don't know. I doubt if they submitted that much evidence for it, but is there something with what David said that go blue is pretty tough to even pass that first prong, to show that, I mean, is go blue confusingly similar to M go blue?
Okay, I had to preface this by saying I was a consultant for the defense in this case. So there were a couple of things going on, but here again, you got to look at when you're doing a parody slash satire type defense. Okay, number one, as Jeff said, you hope the judge gets the joke, and quite frankly, in a lot of parody cases, even in court, they come down to whether the judge thought it was funny. And there are, the classic casebook trademark cases with the back in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a popular poster that said "Enjoy Cocaine," that was a take on the Coca-Cola logo. That was a famous case. There was another one where there was a public service announcement for birth control, and it showed a a pregnant young woman in a Girl Scout uniform with the slogan "Be prepared," which is the Boy Scout slogan. Okay, and those cases really basically shook out on whether or not the judge thought it was funny, unlike some recent cases with Chewy Vuitton or whatever. But the whole point of if you're doing a parody or a satire type defense, okay, that's what's called an affirmative defense, where I'm going to admit, yeah, it's similar to the trademark because it was intended to be as similar to the trademark because I'm making a joke about the trademark owner. All right. And so there again, you don't get to say, oh, well, go blue could mean lots of things, and then say, and the reason I registered it because I was making a pointed, targeted joke about the trademark owner. That doesn't make any logically consistent sense, because parody, satire, commentary, nominative use, all of those things are what are called affirmative defenses. You're coming in and you're saying, yeah, I use the trademark, because parody or satire, to be effective, has to call the subject of the parody or satire to mind. So you're saying, yeah, I actually intended to make an association with the trademark owner, but I'm doing it for some reason that is, excusable or permissible under some other doctrine of fair use, nominative use, parody, satire, free speech, whatever. All right. So you don't get to say go blue could mean lots of different things and then turn around and say, oh, well, the reason I registered it was to make fun of of the University of Michigan. You have to, you can't really do that kind of yoga, certainly not in a UDRP defense.
Yeah, so John, you made it clear for me. I mean, seriously, you cleared it up that you can't just throw a bunch of defenses against the fucking wall and think something's going to stick, and especially a smart panelist in court. Of course, a smart judge is going to know you can't stay in one lane, moron. I mean, you're, what are the facts? I mean, if you truly were getting this for this reason, that's one thing. Were you getting for this reason or that reason? You can't have registered it for these different reasons. So, no, it does make sense, because sometimes guys like me, we think, yeah, mention everything. And then like one of them will stick, and it's like, no, now nothing sticks. It's like trying to catch, all the money out of the sky and you don't get any. About the Enjoy Cocaine, that was a popular shirt. That was a pretty cool thing. Um, but also I wanted to bring up, because it came to my mind. I remember one time, this was in 2017, I got a UDRP for cbnt.com, and I answered the complaint myself, and I lost. And on Name Pros, John made a comment that that's what you get when a fucking domain owner answers it himself. Basically, like, poking me, and I was down at the time for some other reasons, and I had to answer my own complaint. But anyway, John, so what I did in that case, and I did lose the UDRP, I I prepared a federal complaint, an ACPA complaint, um, and I sent it to the bank who won the case, this fucking Citizens Bank, and I said, "You guys, okay, you want to answer this, or you give me back my name, or you want to, we'll just go to court. But, we'll do the real big thing on this goofy ass thing." Because I had made a case that was really sophisticated, if I say so myself, and it probably was. But anyway, was talking about there were other um, senior users to this mark. I had many defenses, but it was more defenses for court, and the panelists didn't give a shit and transferred my name. But anyway, the bank executives were very nice. They said, "Yes, we don't want to go to court, and it looks like your complaint is real." They didn't know. They were lawyers like me. Yeah, they didn't know. And so I did get the name back. So I didn't give up. I went ahead and prepared, a federal complaint, and I was scared of. But anyway, I did get the money. I did get the domain back, and subsequently sold it. But anyway, that's my success story. But that was like also, John, I love the stuff that you post. You give a lot of great, advice. People don't even know on name pros. Still, chiming in on this person has this, this issue, and it's fun to see the comments there. And I don't think anything's lost in the text version. I appreciate your bull. Okay, so this next
I'm
case,
glad
yeah,
I'm glad to know you. I'm glad to know you survived me slapping you around. I know. Jeff Newman has had to recover many times from my personal bluntness with people. But yeah, I could be pretty off putting.
yeah. I mean,
And that's been around since, God, when was that INTA mailing list? Way back when? Oh my God, there were thousands of people subscribed to that. You would just go off on them, and people didn't know you at all. And there was a ton of people on that mailing list, and you used to, oh, it was hysterical. I usually laughed, even when I was the brunt of it. I thought it was great.
if you want to know, some of these stories, join the ICA. Every once in a while, John will share some of them, especially about. And I'm not going to talk about the impersonations. He might say something that names Con when we're on the panel. But anyway, interesting old stuff. I would say old bullshit. Okay, these next two cases we got to get through fast. Except they're both. I'm going to give them away. They're both transfers. They were both Don Osborne, this panelist who. Let me, like I've mentioned before, and John, I don't know if I've mentioned it to this room before, and my two co-hosts know it, but back in 2000, I filed a UDRP on behalf of Ice-T, and Don Osborne was the panelist because he, Ice-T, yeah, Ice, he he was on mcict.com was his domain name. I said, "You need to get Ice-T," and we filed a complaint against this guy in Iceland who actually had a right to his name. He didn't even know Ice-T. And this was before Ice-T was on the TV shows and all that. So we filed this complaint and said, basically Ice-T should go to Ice-T. This is a famous person. And, Nestle's, I always say, had more right to Ice-T than Ice-T. But Dawn Osborne, like she does today, she did back then, Ice-T should belong to Ice-T. You guys win this, and I say it's my only regret in the domain space because took somebody's stuff right from them, snatched it right from them. Okay, so Don Osborne notoriously sides, in my personal experience and after reading all these cases, with brand owners. So in this next case, arrows.international, so it's a domain name .international, ARROWS.international. This domain was registered last year in May 28th, so 1 year ago. Uh, but the complainant in this case is Arrow, no S, Arrow Electronics out of Colorado versus this registrant out of Vietnam. Well, classic case, the respondent didn't reply, but the complainant says the disputed domain copies our logo, and if you look at the website, Arrow Electronics is arrow.com. You go there, and arrows.international, no, they don't look the same to me. The logos don't look the same to me. You use the word arrow, of course it's arrow. I mean, so that's similar to the word, but I don't think the logos look the same. And what really made Dawn, I believe, made her transfer this name away was down at the bottom of the website for arrows.international. It says arrows with an S, electronics. Inc. So that, but the websites were different. The services similar with regards to technology and equipment and stuff like that. But it really was, I mean, I really believe this company, Arrows International, when you look at the website, it is a different company. I believe they did have legitimate use. Why they put Arrows Electronics down at the bottom, that was what tipped the scale and hurt them. If it would have just been Arrows International down at the bottom of their main page, then I would have seen no reason why there should have been a transfer, or there was no proof of bad faith registration, and it certainly looked like legitimate use. Well, go to you first, David, with this one, Arrows.International. It was a transfer. Why did you not like this decision?
Well, I don't like her mischaracterizing the facts. So if she's saying the logos are confusingly similar and they're not even remotely close, then that's one strike against her. And she didn't really talk about the website as it's being used. It seems more like a consulting business that has services, and they talk about their expertise, and they talk about the countries they're based in, which were not Vietnam, but European countries. And the Arrows Electronics Inc. is actually incorporated in the UK. I don't know if that's their business name. That might be. But if they had responded and said, yeah, this is our business name, we're incorporated in the UK, but we do business in Europe, and it's a remote business because I live in Vietnam. That would have made sense to me if that was the fact. But he didn't reply, so we don't know. But I discount the analysis that Dawn gives because she mischaracterized the logo, she mischaracterized the similarity of the websites. I went to arrow.com and they don't look anywhere near as close to each other as she characterizes. And there's thousands of businesses that use the word arrow, much more that use the word arrows. So like 2,000 plus businesses using the word arrows. I don't understand. She just thinks that every case should be a formula transfer, 99 point, I don't know, something percent of the time. And that's why I think she fundamentally misunderstands the way the UDRP should be interpreted. And we'll talk more about that in the next case that she decided.
Jeff, what do you think about this? Arrows.International was transferred.
Yeah, this one I actually kind of agreed with Dawn because they do copy a bunch of content, including even the copyright notice, right? They copy all of that. And I don't know what other information was submitted, but it says that the complainant was passing itself off as, and I can see that if you look at the two websites side by side, it's the same coloring, it's very similar content, it's the same exact copyright notice for God's sakes. Arrows International, the copyright notice that appears at the bottom is 2024 Arrows Electronics Inc., which is not right. That's so. You can't have it both ways, right? You can't. Maybe Arrows is a generic type mark that many people can use, but I sort of side with Dawn on this one because it does look a lot alike.
It's really that one thing, electronics, that word, they used it. I don't know why they used it. Maybe somebody was creating their website for them, but I didn't see a lot of uh, same material,
It's
and one's an
oh
LLC, one's a corporation.
yeah, it's well, what you have to do with sites like when you look at the Arrows International, where it's kind of mysterious, there's no real contact information or anything like that. You take swatches of text and you put those into Google. Okay, so if you go to like Arrows International right now and you scroll down to the bottom where it says environmental, social, and governance at Arrows, doing good is good for our business and our global community. Okay, you go to arrow.com, the complainant's site. At Arrow, doing good is good for business and our global community. I mean, there are huge swaths, practically all the text on the respondent's website is copied and pasted from the complainant's site, which is extensive. You have to go search it out. But again, you can use Google just to search on swatches of text and see that the respondent's website is just put together of bits and pieces of the complainant's website, which is why it copied the copyright notice.
Yeah, so that's like Jeff and John against me and David. That's not really fair. No, no. Anyway, it is. I didn't realize all that copyright. That copyright. Right. If there's that much material copied, I'd have to say to Jeff, I'd have to almost agree with Don there. Except you can't blame David, and I feel the same way. She always okay. We're gonna. So that was a transfer. So we'll give it to her. We're gonna go to the next decision just to show that won a couple points on this next decision. CessnaRigging.com. CessnaRigging.com. Textron Innovations out of Indiana. We talk about them all the time. Jeff had to, you know, he decided the case. It was a line comb. It was engines anyway, because this company Textron owns. They bought Cessna. Cessna bought Beechcraft, or it doesn't matter. They own all sorts of different, very popular aircraft manufacturers, and these different engines. Like Jeff was part of that line cone case. I can't remember how you pronounce it. I can't remember the spelling.
There's Lycoming
Lycoming.
repairs, and that's what the respondent was doing on the
Right.
site.
The one is, let's see here. Hold on for a second. Let me see who this. Just Shills wants to join us on stage. Looks like he's been around for a while, so I'll bring him up here. But don't talk until I'm ready for you, because we got to shut this down here shortly. But anyway, Just Shills. So thanks for joining us. But hold on for a second. Let's get through this case. It's not going to be long. But anyway, Textron files a lot of cases recently. They have relationships with different. There was a guy that was doing, an academy, right? I think it was last week we went over it. Doesn't matter. King Air Academy. But so King Air is another one of their trademarks they bought when they bought Beechcraft, I believe. But anyway, so there's a lot of instructors. There's a lot of parts dealers. There's a lot of maintenance repair facilities that use Textron trademarks in their domain names because they use them in a fair use type of way, and many of them seem very clear how they're being used fairly. And then Textron many times will say, not give all the facts in their complaint, that yeah, we knew about this company, or we had done business with this company, or we sponsored them, or we're well aware that they're using our stuff. Of course, we didn't authorize them, but they're using it. You don't have to authorize them when it's in a fair use capacity. In this case, the respondent didn't reply. It was John Effinger of Effinger Aviation out of Texas. He didn't reply, so the panelists said, the respondent does not make it clear on the website that it's not associated with the complainant, even though it really is just selling these specific rigging systems for Cessna. They've been, and the domain was registered back in 2003. Seems like a long time ago to me, but the panelists said, not responding, providing no explanation why he registered this particular name. That's, and this was Dawn that was making the decision. So, and then Dawn said, it's obviously that this was registered for commercial gain, which of course it was, in my opinion, a fair use. So Dawn transferred this. So Jeff, you, David, and then John, here's some comments about this. I'm interested. How is this fair?
Well, I would have liked for the respondent to have responded. That would have helped. I also would have liked if she would have done a full Oki data analysis, which she did not. But when I went through CessnaRigging.com, uh, I and you use the same rationale that I used, but also others. I mean, I took it from others of doing a holistic view. Yes, it doesn't have an express disclaimer, right? But it is clear looking at the site that it is not Cessna, right? There's no confusion there. The site, from my cursory look, again, it was just a cursory look, looks like the site only relates to Cessna rigging and not to any third party. I think, if she had examined the Oki data and took a holistic approach, this should have come out like Lycoming repair. And but knowing Dawn and being involved in a case right now that potentially involves nominative fair use. That is not a concept that Don believes in, unfortunately.
Yeah, Dave, what do you think
Um,
about this? I'm
yeah.
sorry, Dave. Yeah, Dave,
No, that's okay.
what are you thinking? You double clicked, you're on mute still.
Yeah. So yeah, she doesn't know how to apply the OK data test. She says it does not make it clear that they are not connected with the complainant and therefore is not a bona fide offering of goods and services. But when you look at the website, it actually shows like the top of the header, you got home services, John's blog, contact, photos, and videos. And then you go to the contact page and it's clear you're calling this guy named John in Crescent, Texas. And he works 9 to 6, Monday to Friday. And he offers rigging services. His website gets less than, according to SpyFu, like 8 visits a month from his website, just from Google searches, 9 maybe. He has 53 organic keywords. So either he's getting most of his business from like repeat clients that he's had since 2003. And that's the thing. This website's been there since 2003. That's 22 years. Why are they going after these sites now? They could have done this way back when and told them like, but now I think he's near retirement age. And I see this with the same case last week where, oh, well, let's scoop up all these names that are descriptive of our website so these guys can't sell their businesses to somebody else. It really is interfering with their value of their businesses. Just like John mentioned, when those guys had that Mercedes shop website, they moved it over to their LLC, and then all of a sudden they got another UDRP. So
Yeah, and you look at
that's
the you look at the testimonials on the site. I'm not sure if someone could have made that up, but you know, there's a ton of pilots that have testimonials about his work with Cessna, all talking about his work with Cessna. Um, if he had just responded, and if this panelist had more knowledge of nominative fair use, I think it was certainly a winnable, should have been a winnable case.
I don't know if you really took a look at it, John, but this case, because you have to look at what Dawn included as the complaint. But even though with a reply, I'm sure you feel like there's some way to win this, because there absolutely is. But no reply, was there enough? I mean, was there enough for her to transfer this name? Do you feel? I mean, she just jumped to the conclusion that it was bad faith registration, even though it was over 20 years ago.
Yeah, it's tough to say. And one thing to mention is in looking at UDRP decisions is, there are a lot of times where a lot of stuff gets argued or presented that doesn't necessarily find its way into the decision. So you don't necessarily see everything that the panel had. But no, this looked like a nominative use, type of situation. And like Jeff said, I mean, there are some panelists who treat the Okie data factors like it came down, with Moses on, from Mount Sinai, and it ends up being just a trap for the unwary, for people that are, doing the normal thing. These are the kinds of cars I work on, whatever. I thought you were going to do like homing.co, which was one in April, which struck me as one of the most recent egregious decisions, because Lycoming is a county in Pennsylvania, and Lycoming.co, Lycoming co means Lycoming County, to anyone within a stone's throw of where I'm at.
Interesting. All right. Hey, we're about done, but Just Shills joined us on stage. Never had him here before. Hey, nice to have you. What's your comment or question?
Hey guys, well, first of all, the space is super amazing. It kind of allows you to think differently outside of the box, especially with everybody's feedback on it. One of the questions that I had was regarding a specific name. So let's say if there's a name that you're looking to build on something, there are similar names that are taken by other people, let's say on Twitter, on social medias, but somehow you're able to take that one specific name, which the .coms was available, and let's say you pursue it, and now you're building something on it. How quickly or is it efficient enough to register a company name and then trademark it right away? Because when I checked the trademarks, there weren't any on that specific name. So I guess a question is this something that has to be done immediately, or as long as you have your social media channels, you have your logo everywhere, you have your own domain name? I don't know. It's just I'm just trying to figure out. I guess we have all the best of the best talents here. Is it something you need to move quickly and just trademark it, or is it something that it can wait? Because as long as you have your name, you've been out there on a domain name, you have your social medias on a lockdown. Like, what do you guys suggest? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I'm going to talk first since I'm the host and one of the main ones. And I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to let the lawyers really answer this. But certainly you got a good head start there, meaning so you've got your domain name, some of your social media handles. Well, you're going to file for your trademark for, you want as many protections as you can. Of course, the lawyers are going to jump in here and tell you, you got to, if you're going to file for your mark and you're not using it yet, then you're going to have like this future use and you're not going to get a registered trademark until you're actually, this is in the US, using it. But I do think, I do like that, by securing some of these things, say incorporating, getting your .com, having your social media handles, already checking that there's nobody else really using that, you got a great head start, but still, you're going to need to start conducting some commerce, doing some business. And then, of course, you register a trademark, you have more protections, but always keep all your information, because even these you're doing business as and your registration of your domain name, these are all going forward, all helping to establish your common law mark even before you uh, get your registered mark. So it got a good head start. But go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, without knowing kind of the specifics about the name and whether the mark could be trademarked and, or whether it's descriptive or whatever it is, the only thing I can say now is that trademark law in the United States, if that's where this is based on use, not necessarily, um, you know, the first to file. It doesn't, I mean, obviously there are some advantages, but at the end of the day, your use of the mark in commerce is what gives you the trademark right. So rushing out to file a trademark registration is not, uh, in my view, as important as actually building up the business and getting use, but also figuring out whether the mark itself can operate as a trademark. That analysis needs to be done, right? If it's a descriptive word, descriptive two words, and it actually describes what you're doing, then there may be a reason why there are no trademarks for that term or those terms. Um, but it's hard to say without knowing the mark. But the only thing I can tell you is rushing out to get a trademark registration is not the most important thing. It's actual, if there are trademark rights to be had, it's through use, and not through rushing to get a filing.
David, what do you say?
I say that sometimes people might have a shorter version of that domain name. Just because you got the .com doesn't mean it's available. If you have a three-word version, somebody else has the one-word version, and they're in a similar line of business, and it's distinctive, you could have problems. So you really want to do a search. You want to understand what constitutes confusion. Maybe get a hire a professional. If you don't know what trademark law is or how it works, then definitely need to hire a lawyer. But in the abstract, if you just have generic terms, then you don't need a trademark. You're not going to get one. So those are that's the long and short of it.
Not a lot of info here, but John, any comments from you, and then I'll wrap this thing up.
Yeah, I like what Jeff Newman said. And I think the biggest mistake, the biggest misconception in the domaining industry among domainers is this idea that trademark rights derive from registration. But what I recommend most of all in these situations is that you go to your bank, you get an additional debit card for your checking account, write down the PIN on a piece of paper, put it into an envelope, and the address to mail that to is at johnberryhill.com. That way, I could just take the money directly out of your bank account without having to, go through a lot of nonsense.
And that's you can get all that information from John's website. Like he never gives his email, but if you go to johnberryhill.com, apparently, it's real easy to contact him. Did you want to say something, Jeff? I got another comment, then we're going.
No, I just thought that was pretty funny.
It was okay. It was a 50. It was a 5 on a 10 scale for you, John. Hey, John, I thought you were going to mention that what Jeff said, very important, that domainers always say, hey, I trademarked it. I got my name and I trademarked. What do you mean you trademark something? Like Jeff said, it's all about usage. So do you do business as that, or you just think, I think I'm going to go trademark it? And you'll hear people, in rooms, basically anywhere on a podcast or someone say, yeah, well, I registered that name and then I trademarked it. Like they got it stamped like a fucking cow or something, branded. You got to do business. There's a lot more, like Jeff said, it's usage. Are you using it? And then some trademark lawyers that I remember speaking to, they do say things like, hey, you check the revenue that you're getting as a business. And if you're getting business from certain products that have a name, you can sort of work it backwards. If you're making some money off of something, yeah, you really want to protect that. And what are what are you making money off of? What's it called? The name of it? I mean, basically, like I said, so if you're making money off of a mark, yeah, those are ones that you certainly want to protect more than others. If you're not doing business on something, you really can't trademark it anyway. Although, around the world, I think even in Canada, they do let you do some things without showing there's use. And that's why you'll see some people I don't know what they call it, forum shopping for trademarks. In the old days, they'd go to the Netherlands or something, and they can give you one in like 60 days, a trademark, and then, you know, tricky. You can still file a UDRP with that. Hey, I appreciate everybody sticking around today. We went way over. We go 90 minutes here. Today we went whatever it's called, 2 hours. But thanks for being here. We're going to be here next Tuesday, noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And also, I mentioned at NamesCon, you're going to see a lot of us. Fortunately, David's still not traveling. He's going to wait until 2030. But Jeff's going to be there. John's going to be there. Karen, who joined us, she's going to be there. We're all going to be talking about these legal issues and then some other stuff that's fun. So this is okay, but we'll talk about fun stuff too. But that's November. So think about that, because we like to see everybody in person. Then you can see how tall we are. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it. That's going to be it for today. That's it. Take it easy.